Hello and welcome to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki and I'm missing my co-host today, so I've replaced him with two. Please welcome Andy Brassell, European football expert. Hello, Andy.
Hello.
And of course, Raphael Honigstein. No need for introductions over here.
Thank you, Mina.
I'm very nice today. Right, well, a lot of action happened in the weekend and midweek, and we'll be starting with Spain since the title race is hotting up. Right, should we talk about Valencia first? And that game on the weekend? Barcelona now getting closer and closer, 4 points away. What did you think, actually, of Barcelona's performance against Getafe?
It did the job. I
You don't seem very impressed.
It's a performance we've seen so many times before. I think a lot of teams are psychologically rolled before they get there, and it's, I think it's a theme in La Liga this week with Barcelona and Real Madrid that other teams have had their moments against Barcelona and Real Madrid, but they couldn't make it count.
But it's Luis Garcia Plaza. I never thought that he would have this team struggling so much. Do you think it was the fact that they used so many attackers and poor Getafe just felt really, really overwhelmed?
Well, I mean,
or did you not see this?
Getafe are always the underdogs, aren't they? I mean, whatever happens. And as far as Barcelona is concerned, I think the problem for them is the lack of intensity, as we said throughout the season. They don't seem to be getting themselves into these great performances. They win games and they do enough to stay in the running, but a lot of the performances you look at individuals to really shine, but collectively they haven't quite hit the heights yet.
So you don't think they can win La Liga?
No, I still think they can very much win La Liga. I think it'll all come down to that one game. If it's still 4 points going into the Clásico, I think that a win for Barcelona would really turn things around. Of course, Real Madrid would still have a point clear, but I think the psychology would shift, and the realization for Madrid that they couldn't afford not to even to draw another game might change things. Also, it remains to be seen how the Champions League semi-finals will impact, because they're wedged. The Clásico is wedged right in those two semi-finals from either side, and you just think that Barcelona get momentum. As I said, I mean, the performances are not really that amazing, but the bigger problem for them has been the lack of intensity. And now that they at least get the results without the lack of intensity, so they see it as progress.
Well, what about Real Madrid? How do you see them coping? Because, I mean, they were held by Valencia, who I have to say defended really well, especially for the fact that, it looked like for a while they were even going to lose third place. And they sort of kept them out of the box, made them, have to depend on quick counterattacks and shots from outside. They couldn't get through.
Well, of course, Valencia did lose third place, and they've been in terrible form recently. So I think probably when Barcelona looked at the fixture list maybe like 8 to 10 weeks ago, they would have thought this is a game where Real Madrid can slip up. But no one really expected it on the night, because Valencia have looked a shambles in recent weeks. So for them to come back, I suppose, actually losing third place is maybe the prompting they needed to up their level. They did a similar thing against Rayo Vallecano last night. They beat them 4-1. So I think that's quite important for them. But I think Real Madrid dealt with it well, processed it well, and dealt with the tension well, because of course all the pressure was on them going into the Madrid derby. Everyone always expects them to roll Atletico, because they always do. But for the first hour last night, Atletico were pretty strong. Falcao scored that equaliser. But talking about the bit where Real Madrid and Barcelona can have the psychological drop in other teams, I think it was Diego Simeone, the Atletico coach, said after the game, in the moments where Real Madrid dominated, they made the most of it. And I think really that's the thing that's given El Real the sort of drop on the season as a whole, probably.
Okay, so do you think that Real Madrid have what it takes to defeat Bayern?
Yes, I do think they have what it takes. I think Bayern just don't have enough quality for me at the back to withstand the likes of Ronaldo and Higuain running at them. I think Bayern can hurt them, and they can score goals against them, but the fact that the first game is in Munich just works a little bit against them. So I think over 2 times Real Madrid, not huge favourites for me, but favourites enough to do it. I'd say 60-40 in their favour.
Oh, I think it was about 80-20, to be very honest. But we've got Hamid on the line. Who you're very close to the screen, Hamid.
Sorry,
he's a La Liga expert. Tell us what you think of Madrid, and why did they stumble against Valencia? Do you think it's a case of, like Mourinho said, the referees are against them, or are they just not really doing what they're meant to be doing?
I think, for starters, Mourinho's comment about referees is purely to take that pressure off and take the spotlight of showing a bad performance on the team and focus on blaming a referee, because he doesn't want the players to feel under more pressure than it is. But however, I mean, if you saw the fans after the match, there was a standing ovation for when the players left the field. The fans were all right, as in they saw that the players did try. The chances were there to win the game. Even in the last minute, Di Maria had a pretty decent chance, which I thought he should have done better with. But overall, I think just the way they approached the game, they look more too tired. They look too tired. They look very lazy. They look like they're not getting to the balls that they used to get to. They used to pressure much higher up the field. Now it's like Khedira has to come from deep to pressure on the halfway line. So it's like almost like there's a shift in where the ball used to be retrieved from. So now they're retrieving it from their own half, as opposed to being in the opponent's half, which is why Madrid are most ruthless.
And what about for the game against Atletico Madrid? I mean, it was just the Ronaldo show. For a while there, it looked like it was going to end 1-1, and then but it seems like Ronaldo just doesn't want to give up.
I mean, the way I view the Madrid derbies, I view them as a separate case to what most Madrid matches are like. The Madrid derby is unique. It's like saying the Clásico, form means nothing. But it's the same story every year. Atletico Madrid usually score first, for example, and then Madrid end up winning it and running away with it with very little chances. And that's kind of what happened. Yes, I mean, the first half an hour, I kind of felt like Madrid had a lot of control over the match. Like, they didn't have possession, but they had, like, you didn't feel like they were very nervous. And then when Ronaldo scored, it kind of eased that tension. And then they took their foot off the pedal again, which is what they've been doing a lot this season in second halves. Is they score and then they kind of sit back. And I think that's a mistake that they've been doing, because if you notice against Malaga and against Villarreal, teams will take the chances and score against you eventually. So 1-0 is never a good scoreline for Madrid. But it was just Ronaldo. It was Ronaldo stepping up, showing that he doesn't want to lose this league that easy. And there were certain players, like I think Khedira, to be honest, no one really spoke about him in the game. And I think he was probably one of the best players on the pitch. He ran non-stop. He closed every pass. He was trying to close any space. He was looking at empty blocks of space where Atletico Madrid players would run into and say, I want to occupy that space. I don't want them to be available for the pass. And I think he did that well. But the other players, like Cohen didn't have a very great game. Xabi Alonso, these kind of games for Xabi Alonso don't really suit him, where he's pressured too much. He doesn't have enough time to distribute the ball. But again, it looks like a tired performance, but they have enough in their squad. I mean, if you look at the squad, Ozil coming off the bench, and he had a pretty decent return to the pitch. And that's what they have, Madrid have, is when they need it the most, a lot of their players tend to step up and succeed.
Would you agree with that, Andy?
Well, I think that they might have looked as if they had a bit in the legs in the first 60 minutes maybe. But I think it showed how high the fitness levels are and how high the intensity levels can be and how they came on in the last half an hour. Really, it would have been easy for them to wilt after Falcao scored that goal. The atmosphere at the Calderon was really picking up. Yeah. And I think really what they did from there, how ruthless they were from there, shows that they were laying down a marker to Barcelona. Not just to say, look, we can win this game, but to say, even though it's diminished to 4 points, you still have to get those 4 points off us.
I mean, I think just to add to a point, I think what's crucial about Madrid and Barcelona, about the way they're playing, I mean, even Barcelona went 1-0 down to Zagorov. The team, the players in particular, have a belief that no matter if they concede, that they can still win the game. And I think that kind of confidence, it's a championship quality confidence. It's what leads you to trophies. And Madrid are not only putting out a marker to Barca. I mean, I think in their mind right now, is already with Villarreal, Valencia, and now Atletico. They're already focusing on Bayern. They might not say it, but they have a mind on how they don't want to overexert themselves in the league so that they're ready for Bayern. Because they know against Bayern, they're going to have to put up a bit more energy than this.
Okay, quick question before I let you go. Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi is the most talented player on the planet. There's no doubt about that. I think the most complete player on the planet is Cristiano Ronaldo. What you prefer, I mean, the one thing I always say, would Messi win in Real Madrid? I don't think so. I don't think the Madrid players would suit his style, whereas Ronaldo could go to Barcelona and I think he would win. Okay,
thank you so much for joining us, Hamid. We'll speak to you soon. What about you guys? Who do you think? Okay, I'm not even going to have this conversation with you because it's all Messi with you.
I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo's really
even
unlucky.
Even after the seventh hat trick.
Yeah, he's unlucky because, he has to share a platform with the best player that I've ever seen and probably that we will ever see. He is a phenomenon, Messi, and whatever Ronaldo does will just almost pale into significance to
that much.
the brilliance
That's
of
the
Messi. I'm
difference.
afraid that's what it's like, yeah.
Of course, Cristiano's not that unlucky because he's talented, handsome, and rich.
True, and humble.
That's right. Very important.
But do you think this is why people dislike him? Is because he knows how good he is and how good looking he is, or whatever it is. And whereas Messi is just a non-threatening person because it's just talent, it's nothing else.
Well, I
is
mean,
there a case of jealousy between men?
You're right. It's talent. It's not personality, isn't it? And whenever he comes to an award ceremony, he sort of looks as if he's wearing his dad's suit and probably aftershave.
And no man is jealous of Messi.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He's very lovable and
so you guys are just as bad as women, basically.
No, but I mean, Messi is more likable. I think there's
so that's why he's better?
No. I wanted to say, I don't think that's the reason why he's better. It just makes him overall a much more attractive proposition. Cristiano Ronaldo, I think it's tough, even when he was at his best at United, it was tough as a neutral to really sort of fall in love with what he was doing, because it came with so much baggage with histrionics, and there was always this sort of, the sideshow and the circus around him. And while he's calmed down, I think, in that respect, and is much better just playing the game, and he's really grown as a player and as a man. With Messi, you always feel he is just a guy who's just happens to be on a pitch playing a football game. And I think that's something that everyone who's ever played football can really relate to. It doesn't look like a job to him. It doesn't look like he's doing it for the YouTube reels, the way that Ronaldo sometimes does stuff just to show off. And
but
Messi
I just want to see if it was Messi who looked like Ronaldo, who was very up himself, thought highly of himself. Would people love Messi? Would they start rating Ronaldo more?
I think it's about style of play as well, because I think it's very easy to imagine. It's always very difficult to rate, say, the current Barcelona side or Messi. Is he the best player in the world? Is he better than Maradona? Are they the best team ever? These are ridiculous questions because, of course, it's still going on. There's no historical perspective to it. But I think you can imagine Messi succeeding in any era of football. He's got a timeless style. Whereas Cristiano Ronaldo, what he does is very modern. You can see all the hard work he's done. He's very direct. He's very ruthless. There's far less romance to it.
But would Messi be able to do it in Stoke on a wet and rainy night? Okay, that is unfortunate. We have time for On Spain. But when we come back, we'll be discussing Germany and France. So we'll see you in a bit. Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show. Now we're on to the Bundesliga and, of course, the exciting match that happened last night between Dortmund and Bayern. Raph, our resident German expert, what did you think about Dortmund? Thoroughly deserved the points, surely.
Yes and no. I mean, the first half was just absolutely incredible from them. They outran Bayern, they outfought Bayern, they outplayed Bayern, they created all the chances. Bayern had less possession, which is something that's unheard of in the last few years. And they looked really clueless, a little bit like those games before, the 3 games before that they had won. When Bayern are faced with this kind of pressing in midfield, the whole system sort of breaks down and goes into complete kind of reboot mood without any idea of what they should do. And in the second half, though, you have to say, perhaps as a consequence of Dortmund easing off a little bit and perhaps lacking that bit of intensity, they did come back into it. They controlled the ball a lot better. They didn't perhaps create the clear-cut chances that Dortmund did, but at the end, after Lewandowski's goal, they had enough chances to not just draw the game but win the game. So it is a deserved victory on the balance of the 90 minutes, and it's a deserved title win for Dortmund, I think we can say, on the balance of the whole season. But it could have easily gone the other way in the last few minutes.
Do you think, because when you look at it, do you think that it's a case of Mario Gomez can't really hold up the ball, and then there's, you don't have really that kind of striker that in Bayern Munich that can do what Lewandowski can do?
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. I mean, that really made the difference on Wednesday night. Lewandowski won every single ball. He made it look as if those clearances that came from defence were pinpoint passes, because he would get to them and hold up the ball and bring on this wave of yellow attacks. And they love to sort of swarm out like bees and sort of overrun you that way. And Gomez couldn't do it. With the back towards goal, he is useless. And also Müller was completely lost behind sort of enemy lines. He had 5-6 players in front of him, closing down the space where they can play the vertical ball, so he had to go wide. He was completely anonymous. And in the end, all Bayern could do was pass it to Ribéry, who was doubled up, who had then pass it back in the middle. Then it passed it to Robben, he was doubled up. And that's how the game went through large stages. Only when Kroos really was deployed further up and Schweinsteiger came on, did they really get a grip on the game, and it was perhaps a little bit too late.
Because they definitely lost the midfield battle. But also, I've got to say, like, you know, Dortmund's defence is absolutely amazing with the way that they double up on people. They close down the lines and then didn't let Bayern at all go in between the lines. But what about this whole Manuel Neuer thing, being thrown bananas? This was an Oliver Kahn similar situation. Can you guys tell me more about it?
Well, Oliver Kahn, because he does look and did play a little bit like a gorilla, was routinely pelted with bananas in all sorts of German stadiums, apart from his own.
He does.
And this was a sort of a reminiscence of that. And, you know, Neuer was being painted or portrayed in a similar fashion by the Dortmund fans. They're saying, you know, you're now the new resident monkey in the Bayern goal. So it's not racist.
It's quite a compliment.
It's not very nice. It's not racist.
Oh, he was fabulous.
He found it very funny because he used to actually get off by having a bit of a go at Kahn when he was still at Schalke, and he famously sort of reenacted Kahn's celebration with the flag, and got a lot of stick from the Bayern fans. So now that Dortmund fans are saying you are new Kahn, it's hugely ironic, and that's why you saw a smile on his face when he was clearing those bananas. So perhaps he was just collecting them to sell them on later on, I don't know. But a lot of people, I mean, we're laughing about this, but a lot of people watching this, and the game was live in 200 countries, really thought immediately, you know, this is racism, this is about Alaba and Boateng and Luis Gustavo, but I can assure you it wasn't. It was just directed at Manuel Neuer.
Okay, what about you? Did you think Dortmund definitely deserved this, or...?
I think what's interesting is in both the games against Bayern this season have played quite within themselves. I think if you go back to pardon me, last year and think the way they played at the Allianz, they completely wowed the world really with that sort of football that they played. But you know, in both these games, they've not played that expansive football, but they've looked relatively in control. I think probably the point that stood out for me, and Raph looking forward to a Champions League semi-final, is how important Schweinsteiger is for Bayern to have some sort of control over possession.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can have the control if they sacrifice Müller. Because I think Toni Kroos on his own can't quite do it. But if you have Kroos playing as a number 10 and effectively coming deep as a third midfielder, then all of a sudden it looks a very different Bayern side. So Schweinsteiger in recent weeks hasn't really been missed, to be fair to Bayern. They certainly missed him on Wednesday night. But I think that Jupp Heynckes must look at this game and must really think, you know, Müller, he's so important the way he links up the play. But against a side that closes the midfield and just puts this wall up of players, he can't get to the ball.
What Real Madrid
so
do.
you might just have Kroos, and you might just have to sacrifice Müller for that game and play with Kroos as a number 10, but effectively a number 3rd midfielder in there. And perhaps, on a positive note, leave Robben and Ribéry a little bit further up the pitch.
Speaking of Robben, who has been converting penalties left, right and centre, that's it? What happened there? Do you think it was just a case of nerves or him not performing in the big stage?
I don't know. I mean, it's easy to say it was nerves. He claimed that he was very confident, and you know, he had converted 8 before in the Bundesliga, so we had no reason to suspect that he wasn't. I think it was just a very poor penalty for whatever reason.
But the defender, Subotic, the way that he
Subotic.
That was probably like the funniest scene I've ever seen.
Was it? I don't know. I thought it was a little bit distasteful and didn't quite reflect.
It was very mean. He's
really
definitely going to have nightmares about it when he falls asleep.
It didn't really reflect well on Dortmund, I think, because you know, they've won so many. They've won so many neutrals over with the way that they've been going about their business. And just in recent weeks, you had this incident with Grosskreutz and Asamoah in the German Cup semi-final, where words were exchanged, and now you had Subotic really being a bit over the top, I think is fair to say. And he was later claiming, Subotic, that he was really taunting Robben because he doesn't like diving, and the irony being that for once this was actually a Stonewall penalty, not a dive. And he somehow convinced himself, Subotic, that it was a dive, along with Weidenfeller. So I don't think it was justified. But, I mean, the point with Robben is that it does create problems because, he's not a very popular figure in the dressing room. And they indulge in him because he delivers. But when a guy like that doesn't deliver, and he certainly didn't deliver on Wednesday, it kind of changes the atmosphere a little bit. And I just wonder what will happen over the next few weeks because he still hasn't renewed his contract. He's a little bit hesitant. I think there's a bit of a story brewing here.
I'm sure Italy would welcome him with open arms. But I do want
because
to...
of the diving, you mean?
Yes, right. Because of the diving. Actually, I would mind him playing for my team. But moving on to...
He has apparently an offer from Juventus.
I heard about that. Is that true?
Well, I'm not his dad. I'm not the one picking up the phone, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're inquiring. But
you think he's a one-trick pony with a really great trick?
I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo's a one-trick pony, but, that's what you need. You don't need anything else, but apart from a guy who smashes in from 30 yards. What else do you need?
That's true, and for Juventus, that will do. Classy win from Montpellier against Marseille, who some were hoping would throw the match. Now, what Marseille fans, this has to do with 99, with the fact that, what was it? Can you clarify that with the Bordeaux thing?
Yeah, there was a thought that basically PSG let Bordeaux win the championship.
That they can take it from Marseille.
Yeah, and I think it's one step on what has been a really increasingly unpleasant relationship between PSG and Marseille, and it's because they're the two biggest clubs in France. I don't think you can say France is a nation that's wholeheartedly passionate about football. They're more passionate about the spectacle than particularly partisan. And the two exceptions to that are Marseille and PSG, really, in the modern era. So it's something that in the increasing mediatisation of the game has been ramped up and up.
Well, when the game started, you did think maybe this was going to happen, but of course that's not true at all because it went on, and I thought that Marseille played quite strongly, or tried to at least.
They had to.
What was it with their front three? They hadn't played in I don't know how long. They looked rather lethargic.
Well, they had a problem because really they had to try and play themselves out of what a poor run they're in. They haven't won for 11 games. They've lost 8 of those. Going into the game yesterday, and even if there were certain fans who I think it's very bizarre backing against your own team, whatever the consequences. But even though there were certain fans who've kind of given up on the team because they feel they haven't got anything back from Deschamps and the current players, they really needed to get themselves in nick. Their last chance of doing anything, because they're not going to qualify for Europe through the Ligue, is to win the League Cup. They're playing the final against Lyon at the weekend, and Lyon are playing really, really well at the moment. They've been unbeaten for about 6 or 7 games since they went out of Europe to Apoel Nicosia. So really it was about finding form, but it was difficult for Deschamps because he wanted to manage his players. He wanted to give Valbuena a rest. He wanted to give Amalfitano a rest, make sure his fringe players like Gignac and Brandao are ready. So it was a very, very difficult situation for him. But I think they played as if those players wanted to get a spot in the League Cup final team.
Okay, so Montpellier are like the fairy tale story. So they spent only 2 million. They were like, 14th last season. And now their players like Giroud and obviously Balhanda, who scored a brilliant goal.
Yeah.
They're coming to... Do you think that they can hold on to these players?
Well, I think he's going to be very difficult for them.
His dribbling, his crossing is fantastic, and the fact that he's been centred through the middle.
It's the thing with Belhanda. It's really extraordinary because he was brought into the team as a defensive midfielder, and when Girard, the current coach, took over, he said, "Well, this guy's got too much technical ability to be sitting in front of the defence." So originally he played him wide left. Then he brought him into the middle this season as a proper number 10. And I don't think the comparisons are really lost on anyone in France, where they're always looking for the new Zidane, this guy with North African heritage, who's in fact chosen to play for Morocco, even though he's born and brought up in France, wears the number 10 shirt, fairly tall for a playmaker. I don't think that's lost on anyone at all, and he has been superb this season. But I think, you know, when people in England talk about the winter break, he was really blowing in the second half of December, and I think the break and the fact that Morocco went out quite early at the African Cup of Nations, so he only had to play 3 matches, really worked in his favour, because he's been a renewed player in the last couple of months.
Well, so what do you think now that Montpellier will take it?
Well, you know, for the last couple of months, we've been thinking they're going to get overtaken at some point because PSG don't have the team exactly, but they have the players who are good enough to...
They don't seem to have the striker. That's the thing. They have all these playmakers, but they don't have that person that can do everything that you really need.
No.
And they keep rotating.
That's why they've been using Waro as
he seems to be a little bit better than what you
the player. Yeah,
the Gamero, sorry.
He's probably Gamero's a great striker, but he's not suited to one up at all, whereas Waro can hold the ball up. But they even in the Classico against Marseille at the weekend, they even used Menez as a central striker, so almost playing without a striker, a bit like say Roma used to do in Italy, for example. But this is all a problem sort of caused by Pastore really, and how to fit him in the team. But you still had the sense that, you know, PSG have the individuals that can make the difference, even if they're not playing well. They were outplayed on their own patch by Montpellier, by Lille, the existing champion, and you think, you know, that they, because they can make the difference at these key moments, they should be fine. But Montpellier will just not lie down.
No, and I don't think anyone wants them to lie down. That's all we have time for on that, but we're back with Serie A, my favourite league, and I'm sure it's also Raf's favourite league. So we'll see you in a bit. Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. And now we're on to Serie A. And of course, I'm really happy and everyone's looking at me because Juventus won and they're still 1 point clear ahead of Milan after Milan dropped points in over the weekend against Fiorentina, which was a really unlikely source considering how Delio Rossi and his men are doing very badly over there. What do you think? You think this is you said it from the start that Juventus would be winning. Do you still think that's the case?
Yeah, absolutely. And now they even started scoring. I mean, they had trouble scoring for a long time.
Well, they're still having trouble finishing.
Yeah, but, you know, I mean, they're the hardest working team. We knew that throughout the season. I just think that it's right in the end that the hardest working team will actually win you the league, because you cannot always rely on individual flashes of brilliance the way that Milan have done throughout this whole season. The better collective approach will out, and now that Juventus have managed to add a few goals from midfield, because up front, let's face it, they're still not very exciting. Yeah. They've got enough of it. You know, they've got what it takes to win this league.
Well, you see, this is the thing. You say that, you know, you can't rely on individual brilliance. Now they took on Chievo midweek on Tuesday night. They were in my opinion, absolutely appalling. Chievo, you know, they pressed quite high up from the midfield, exploited their fast-paced strikers. The problem with Chievo is they have the third worst attack in Serie A. And yet they still lost because you just needed that moment of individual brilliance. You know, whenever Milan had the ball, which was not very much, they were still looking dangerous. It looks to me like they can still resolve these things that Juventus can't. Yesterday against Lazio, they were pushing and pushing, and they created so many goal-scoring chances in the first half. They were working so hard, but no one would finish at the top. And it looked like it was going to be a draw. And then one moment of madness at the back meant that Mauri had a free header, 1-1, and you needed Del Piero, still need the captain, who 700 games for Serie A, amazing for him, to actually resolve the case.
But that's why these moments of madness happen, because they grind opposition teams down. Teams start making mistakes because they have such a hard time winning the ball back off them. They never get any moment of rest. Lots of teams who aren't that very good manage to rest on the ball, and that helps them to overcome the inferior nature of the quality, because while they're keeping the ball, you know, the others can't hurt them. And even in Italy, possession has become a big weapon for these
well, not for
smaller
Roma,
teams.
but yes.
No, not for Roma. Well, they're not a small team to begin with, but you know,
not big at the moment.
Smaller teams have been able to punch slightly above their weight if they utilize the ball well. But Juventus don't allow teams to do that. I mean, they're a team that don't play Italian football in a way, because they play with high energy. They play almost like an Italian version of Dortmund, and you could see that takes you a long way domestically. I think, ironically enough, in Europe, where Italian teams for so long have been sort of the measure of everything with the way they control games, I think that high energy attitude needs to be modified a little bit, because teams just won't be overrun, won't be overawed. They'll keep the ball, and Juventus will tire. But I think it was a great example, this game, that shows you that the effort, more often than enough, will pay off.
Well, you say that about Europe, but then also what seems to be is that when Juventus face the big teams like the Lazios, the Milans, the Napolis, they do better because these teams let them play football. It's when they suffer against the likes
I wouldn't agree that they do better. I think actually they do worse against these teams.
Really, they keep drawing against all the smaller sides, but they keep winning against the big ones.
But I think really, if you probably look at where the title race has changed over the season, it was maybe the second leg of the Coppa Italia game that changed that, and Vucinic's goal against Milan maybe gave them the belief to go on. So perhaps that was a turning point. But I think another interesting thing about Juventus, a lot of people said at the start of the season they haven't got the squad to see this through. Their first 11's okay, but maybe it's because they haven't had to play in Europe, but they have got more options than people think, and Del Piero is part of that.
They do have more options, but they are very reliant on their midfield, and you could tell that yesterday in the game against Lazio. It's a case of, you need Vidal to run up and down that pitch, and he's just great at pressing the ball, maintaining a high position when they're defending, also coming back to help defend deep if they need to do so. But still they just don't have that striker, and that's what's missing. If they had someone like an Higuain or an Ibra or anyone at the moment,
But if you want to talk about dependence, that's what Ibrahimovic is all about, and that's exactly what was the case with Inter.
Do you think that's what it is? Do you think wherever Ibra goes, he's got to be the only guy that really knows how to play the game?
Perhaps that's it. I think there's such a temptation to use him as a get-out, and funnily enough, that's what Barcelona never really did. That they were never happy to really what they should have done when they wanted to use him as a plan B. It had to be Piqué's long ball to search out Ibrahimovic. A couple of times they did try that against Sevilla in the Cup, against Arsenal in the Champions League. It worked perfectly well, but it was something they never really felt comfortable with doing. Inter and Milan have never had that problem with using him that way.
And not having that dominant striker can also be a virtue, because if you put now Ibrahimovic in this Juventus team, I guarantee you everything would fall apart, because you have a hard-working team and a guy who perhaps doesn't look hard-working, to put it charitably. It would be a disaster.
But what if they had someone like an Higuain or a Lewandowski?
I think, Lewandowski would be brilliant for them. I mean, again, Dortmund,
exactly the same
Dortmund, Juventus. But maybe they'll add someone in the summer. They definitely need someone as far as the Champions League is concerned. Yeah,
they definitely do, because they can't rely on Matri. And of course, Del Piero, who needs to always resolve these matches, comes on as a substitute and scored. Grande Capitano. Hello, we've got Tancredi Palmieri from Milan. How are you, Tank?
Buongiorno ragazzi. I heard you were talking about some new players, Alex.
Yeah, well, we were talking about the fact that Juventus desperately need a striker. What did you think of their match against Lazio? Worthy winners and possible title winners?
Well, actually, that game seems so much the symbol of all the Juventus season. As you said, missing so much a resolver, someone that could convert all the options, all the chances they had along the game. So much missing, I guess, that 12, 15 millions that they couldn't afford of euros, that they couldn't afford past summer to get at Giuseppe Rossi or at Agüero. Definitely, I think that they don't have to waste money with other good players, but not big ones. They need one Higuain, one Agüero, someone like that, someone that can combat, because next year, also with Champions League, I don't know how much the contest team could, put all this effort on any game, any Sunday.
Yeah, well, okay, I agree with that, but also I want to talk about Inter and Stramaccioni, because I thought that was a splendid second half by Inter. You know how I feel about him, although you said it was way too early for him to love him. But I noticed him from before when Arrigo Sacchi wanted him to be the under-17 coach for Italy. He is a special talent, and you could see his players actually celebrating with him when they're doing well. They come to the sidelines. He's very much part of that. Do you think, and I finally saw a second half that was worthy of Stramaccioni, could this be someone that might last more than just an interim, that might be more than just an interim coach?
Well, guys, he's bringing a lot of enthusiasm, let's face it. And Inter needed enthusiasm, not only because they were just with Ranieri, for Ranieri himself, but I mean for the situation, how it was going. But still, they will not just stick to enthusiasm. Result will make the thing. If Inter will clinch the third spot, Stramaccioni will stay. He's a good prospect, but there is not time. Never there was time to build things in Inter and to project that. So Stramaccioni needs desperately to clinch the third spot to stay at Inter. For what is going on, for what the situation is, the way the others are behaving, he has still some possibilities because Lazio losing again, Udinese losing again, Napoli 1-3 at home against Atalanta. So it seems that everyone wants to help the rookie. My opinion still is that if I compared all the calendars, all the match days that are waiting for Lazio, Udinese, Roma, Napoli and Inter, and by gap there is a difference between the calendar of the others and the Inter ones. Inter has to play with Udinese, Inter has to play home against Fiorentina and will not be easy at all because Fiorentina is just 3 points ahead of Serie B. Inter will have the derby at the second last game. So in my opinion, I go with the fact that there is no chance for Inter. I know it's just there are 6 points from the third place, but it's just too difficult. And as you said, yeah, okay, it's true. There is a team spirit, but still, how much is conceding the Inter defense? And there is one thing, one breaking news of this morning, Walter Samuel will be out for the next 21 days, and that means a lot for Inter. Really a lot.
Tancredi, what about our good old friend Mario Balotelli? Does he have an option? Does he have two options? Does he have any options to come back to Serie A? Because I think there is now a point reached where both Mancini and perhaps the Premier League on the whole have really had enough of him.
Okay, I'll give you a very late update about that. Half an hour ago, Mino Raiola, his unfamous agent, spoke to Italian Sky and said that actually Manchester City, okay, these are Raiola's words, so take it as Raiola's words. But anyway, he said that Manchester City don't have the intention to sell Balotelli. He said that Mario is missing Italy, but in this moment not missing that much Italian football, that will be back in Italy, but this is not the right moment. These are the words of Raiola. My opinion, and that is connected with some unofficial sources I have, is that 51% will depend on how, of course, the league will finish. So if City will win the title or not, if winning title or not will determine Mancini's future. All in all, with all the critics that Mancini is giving, anyway, he would also prefer to keep Balotelli instead of selling him. The thing is that Inter, as you asked, has an option to sign Balotelli. Yesterday, before the game, Inter's president Massimo Moratti ruled it out. Said our story with Balotelli is finished, even if we have still sympathy each other. But anyway, we ran already our way. That are just words. Maybe it just could be pre-game, you know. But anyway, the thing is that Raiola, is the Balotelli's agent, is so close to the AC Milan management.
Exactly.
He's almost the unofficial right hand of Galliani.
But this is Galliani's specialty. He knows how to take players that are suffering in other teams, and other teams want to get rid of them. This is Galliani's specialty. He takes them like he took Robinho, like he took Ibra. So if there's any likely destination, I would think it's Milan. Not that I ever believe Massimo Moratti, because for me he seems to have no authority in the Inter dressing room, like Gasperini used to say. He doesn't really decide what's happening. Branca did, and Branca didn't really shut the door on Balotelli coming.
Yeah, but Mina, as you said Galliani's specialty. Galliani's specialty when he's cooking that with Raiola, because Ibrahimovic, Raiola brought to Milan. Robinho, Raiola did it. Van Bommel, the same. Tevez, even if he was not the agent of Tevez, but anyway, Raiola was playing as the middleman between Kia Joorabchian and Galliani. So, if, in my opinion, if Balotelli would be back, I would bet my money on Milan, honestly.
Okay, also I wanted to touch quickly on Javier Zanetti equaling Zob's record of 570 matches in Serie A. I believe only Maldini and Pagliuca did better or played more. A great symbol of Inter, and he keeps going. How much longer will he stay?
Well, the easiest answer would be until his muscle just don't blow out. But I think that still in his possibilities there is at least 1 year more, if not 2. because the thing that I have to admit, honestly, until 3 years ago, I was not so enthusiastic anymore about his performance. But since Mourinho came to Milan, his level of his bar, I mean, this year he has been one of the better for performances, for level, for intensity in Inter. You could also critique that probably that wasn't that difficult if you would be against Inter. But anyway, it's for sure in the top three for what has been his performance this season. And honestly, if he keeps going in this way, there is no limit still set up for him. I believe until this point, he's already the foreigner that played the most games in Italian League. I believe that at least he got a target to take over the Maldini's record, and that would mean play 2 leagues more.
Okay, thank you so much, Tancredi. I believe we'll actually be seeing you next week.
I'll see you on Monday. It will be a big party. Bye, guys.
Perfect. Bye. Of course, that's it. Napoli also third defeat, conceding 3 goals again for the third time. You saw them not doing very well. Wheels are falling off. But after the break, we'll be leaving Europe and we'll be looking at leagues from across the world, one in particular. So we'll see you in a bit. Bye. Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show. I'm Mina Rzouki and I'm joined by Andy and Raph. Okay, so we were basically discussing, I said to you that we're going to go outside. We're going to go to a country that's sort of on the cusp of Europe. Half of it, Istanbul's in Europe. The rest of it is in Asia, so we're off to Turkey and the playoffs. And of course we have the 3 big teams from Istanbul and Trabzonspor. So you tell us about that. What's going on? Who's going to win?
That's right. Well, of course, we've still got this match-fixing scandal.
And this is just a horrible new system.
Hanging over Turkey. So they thought to make things more clear, rather than have the team with the most points win the league, at the end of the regular season, we'll take the top 4, we'll cut their points in half and get them to play each other in a round robin, which is not great for Galatasaray, who obviously finished 8th last season, who've been campaigning for hard sanctions on Fenerbahce, the current champions, whose president is in jail on remand, charged with being the kingpin of these fixings. They would have won the league by 9 points, and now they've got to play for it again with just 5 because it's halved and then rounded up.
Yeah, but the idea is actually, you can understand it.
That's
because
so unfair.
Yeah, but what they're saying is that in the big games against the big teams, there won't be any match fixing. So that's how the title will be decided, rather than playing smaller teams where we don't know what really happened in the background. That's why they've done it.
Well, also, I think it's not just about authentication, it's about creating excitement. And, you know, if you look at how Calciopoli set back the worldview of Serie A, how other people looked at it, I think if
yeah, but imagine they did that to the top 4 of Italy and then asked them all to play with each other.
Sure, but it's one approach. You know, you're introducing a new excitement by creating these big matches. I think maybe the problem is because you have Trabzonspor and then you have Besiktas, Fenerbahce and Galatasaray, you're almost creating too much intensity. You know, if you think of how full on the derbies are between Fener and Gala, you know, you're going to play those twice in the space of 4 weeks. Then you've got Besiktas playing those 2 as well. It's a big deal to Trabzonspor, who still feel as if, you know, that they have this feeling they were kind of cheated out of the league by Fenerbahce last year because you still have that thing hanging over it. So, you know, I think there's going to be a certain degree of animosity in there as well, and it's all crammed into this little period.
So Istanbul basically is going to be a giant mess.
You might get cheap hotels for in the next couple of weeks, who knows?
And Felipe Melo got into an argument, a fight.
Yeah, well, obviously Gala are a little upset that they haven't won the league already. And
Melo was number 1.
Felipe Melo, who's been their outstanding player of the season, and has at last got his rightful number 10 shirt to express the talent he is.
He's a natural number 10 if ever saw one.
He really is. He really is. Only half the man he is for Brazil. But he had a bit of a dispute which ended in fisticuffs with Albert Riera, who used to play for Liverpool, of course, in training. So Fatih Terim, the very experienced coach, said, "Look, time out, guys. Take it off the pitch. We don't want you in training anymore." So they went back to the changing room. Melo locked the door and, well, it didn't end that well for Riera, it's fair to say. Mel has made a full apology. I think he's kind of helped by the fact that he is the most valuable player that Galatasaray have going into the playoffs. But just when you thought he'd calmed down,
I could never imagine him doing something like that, Juventus. He had terrible behaviour sometimes on the pitch, but I can't imagine him being like that. But he's clearly getting off on all the power that
well, you
he's
couldn't
got.
imagine him having a good season on the pitch at Juventus, so it's a complete role reversal.
Yeah, but Fiorentina fans would disagree with you.
Two players locked into a changing room. I thought these things only happened in Greece.
Or with Juventus management. Da-dum-dum. Okay, so, and then there's, of course, the St. Pauli story, which is so sweet.
I mean, that's an amazing story. St. Pauli, of course, chasing promotion in the German second division, and they needed a win against Union Berlin. And with 10 minutes to go, they get the win. But it did look a little bit like a hand of God situation, sort of the hand and head at the same time. And the referee came over to Marius Ebbers, the St. Pauli player, and said, what happened there? Did you touch it? And he said, you know what? Actually, I did touch it with my hand and my head. So they chalked off the goal. But then, just to show that a good deed sometimes goes a long way, they did still manage to win with an injury time goal to make it 2-1. And of course, Ebbers will be on course for all sorts of fair play medals. And he afterwards said, you know what, the referee asked me and I had to listen to the little angel on my shoulder. Isn't that nice?
Oh, that
I think
is
we should
so
all listen more
sweet.
to our little angels on our shoulder.
Why are you looking at me when you're saying that?
It's just a coincidence.
Is it now? Would you do that if you were chasing promotion?
Well, I would if there was a policeman in the team, as there is with St. Pauli, and I felt some sort of feeling that there might be some sort of legal comeback involved.
Imagine if, was it Thierry Henry to have done that? Diego Maradona to have done
Well,
that?
the referee should have just asked them.
Well, maybe if you just ask, then you'll get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you never know. But did you guys enjoy this show?
Oh, very much, as always.
As always, and you? Not
Less
so much.
No,
huh?
no, of course. It's wonderful to be here.
Right. It was so great to have you guys on here. We will be back on Monday, usual time, with Gabriele Marcotti, and of course the Tank is going to be in the studio with us, so I'll still be having 2 chairs next to me. So we'll see you then, same time, same place, same football chat. Bye.